All right. So the problems we're going to focus on, and again, the common theme in this particular lesson group that we're doing is they're all going to have percents in them. So it's going to be mostly application type problems. So we have, after a 15% discount, a shirt costs $40. What's the original cost of the shirt? So I always like to assign what they're asking, or I mostly like to assign what they're asking as the X value. And again, if there is a discount, in my mind, the easiest way to work the problem is you think about what percent do you actually pay. Because the discount is what you don't pay. So DJ, what percent do you pay of this? The discount's 15%. What percent do you pay?
85%.
Exactly, 85%. So you would say 85% of the original cost is going to be $40. Because $40 is the rate after the discount, after the 15% has been taken off. So, in other words, 0.85 x equals 40. And then we can divide both sides by 0.85 to solve for the original cost. And again, for some of you, when I was looking over homework, you were doing the calculations by hand. You know, that's fine, but it's just kind of a waste of time. I mean, if you can do it in your head, great, but if you're starting to write a whole bunch of stuff out, you can just grab the calculator. And whenever it's money, you're going to round to the nearest set. That's really the only thing that makes sense. All right, so 85% of the original cost was paid. That amount was $40. So then you have to solve for the original cost. Any questions on that one? Now, as you guys know, whenever we shop for most things, we have to pay taxes. And so if you go to the Gap and your total was $158.40, and what you're just curious about is what was your total prior to the tax being added on? So, like, how much did those clothes add up to before the taxes were put on? Any idea how you do that one? Isaac?
Would you add 100 to 5.6%?
Okay, so you said 105.6%, and you said add?
Make it 105.6%.
Did you say never mind? Davian, did you have something?
Yeah, I think we got to subtract 5.6% from that.
How do you do that?
Well, with 5.6 is out of that, like, you can multiply it
By what?
you can multiply.
So we'll just call X the cost before tax because that's what we're. So you multiply it by what?
Multiply 5.6% but we gotta turn it into this. So
Sure.
Yeah.
But still, what do we multiply it by?
By 158.
Now, let me ask you this. When you calculate tax, do you calculate it on the cost of the clothes? Because this is the cost after tax has been added in. Do you see how you're kind of putting the chicken before the egg? Okay, so Isaac, are you still saying never mind, or?
Would you divide 5.6% by, maybe divide 158.40 by 5.6%?
Okay, so let's take a back up. When you buy clothing or anything else, you pay 100% of the items, given there's no discount, right? If there's no discount, you pay 100% of the cost. Plus, we're gonna pay 5.6% of the cost in tax. If you were at a restaurant, you could also add in tip, but we don't have to tip anyone at the Gap. So you're gonna pay not 100% because there's no sale. If there's a sale, we could take off for the sale. But you're gonna pay 100% of the cost of the items plus 5.6% of the cost for the tax. So you essentially pay 105.6% of the cost. Because you pay more than 100%. That's why if you buy, let's say, a $100 dress, you're not gonna pay $100. You pay more than that. You guys have all experienced that. You may even, when you were a little kid, ask your mom, like, or dad, like, why does it cost more? And the reason is taxes. So 105.6% of the original cost is 158.40. Because X is the cost before tax, in other words, the original cost. Then we have to put 105.6 as a decimal. So we move the decimal 2 spots to the left. So that's 1.056 of means times $158.40. Now, is the X value, the cost before tax, going to be greater than or less than that 158.40? Or what should it be? So the cost before tax should be greater than? Oh, no. No, it should be less. Good. So let's divide by 1.056. And the reason it is going to be greater or less mathematically is because you're dividing by a number bigger than 1, then the number gets smaller. So what do we get? I think $150? Okay. That's the cost before taxes added in. So you might have bought maybe, well, at the Gap, let's see, $150 could get you like jeans and maybe a top or two, depending on sales. It could be very expensive. But questions on that? All right, so now we're talking about commission. Does anyone know what commission is? What is it, Charlie?
Commission is like how much a store clerk or somebody would get that they help you. So like let's say we helped you on the floor today, and then you sit in and you make it a percentage.
Perfect. Yeah, and clerks in the stores in the mall get those. Car dealerships get them a lot of times, which is why they're super aggressive. But anyone who's an aggressive salesperson, you'll bet your life that they're getting a commission. If they don't much care if you buy it or don't buy it, then they're not getting a commission. So commission means you get paid a percentage, as Shelley says, of what you sell. So real estate agents get commission. They get a ton of commission because think of how much houses cost. Houses cost the most of what we buy. When you think of what we buy clothes, we buy food, we buy, random school supplies, we buy furniture, but the thing that costs the most is our house. So real estate agents work on commission as well. So John sells his house through a real estate agent whose commission is 5%. That means when John sells his house, he doesn't keep all that money. He gives 5% of the money to the real estate agent. Okay? What is the selling price? So John can get $150,000 for the home. So John wants a $150,000 check for his home after he pays his real estate agent the 5% commission. But what does he have to sell it for to get $150,000 after all this is over? So what is the selling price? Let's call that X. Yes. Okay, what is it?
Yeah, okay, so, 105 times, 150,000.
So you added the 5%.
Yeah, if you, yeah,
Now, what percent of the cost of the home does John get?
John gets 150,000.
Yeah, but what percent?
What percent?
Does John get 100% of the cost, the proceeds?
95.
He gets 95%.
Yes.
So he wants 95% of the selling price to equal 150,000. If it doesn't, he's not gonna get 150,000 for his home. So he retains 95% of selling price. So that's why, and I was confused about that a little bit as well. Do you add or subtract with that one? That one, because he only retains 95% of the selling price, that's why it's 95. Yeah.
So would you still get the same answer if you, multiply 105 by 150,000?
It would actually be slightly different. And you can check it out just to see how they compare. So it's 0.95 of X equals 150,000. So what do we get? What does he have to sell his home for? What does he have to list it for?
One,
Go ahead.
115,000, so, wait, 157,894.
800? So maybe just a nice round number, he'll list it for 160,000. Because people always try to talk you down, they'll give you an offer that's less. And also you have to pay a ton of other people too, because this is not considering a lot of other prices you have to pay. Closing costs, for example, which is paying the bank. You have to pay the assessor. They go in your house and they say how much your house is worth. They walk around and judge you based on how well your house is kept up, where it's located, how nice it is. So this is not the only people you have to pay to sell your house, but this is one person each pay. They get the biggest chunk. Right. Did you get the same thing?
Oh, no, I didn't do that.
Okay. Yeah, it's close, but it's slightly different because it's considering it from it's taking the percent out of a different amount. So that is how commission works. Now we're going to do an investment. Now investments work where you are going to put money into a fund and earn interest on it. And this can occur in the stock market. This can occur in a bank account, like a savings account. It also can occur in what's called a mutual fund. A mutual fund is a group of stocks that someone else buys and sells for you because they do that for a living, whereas most normal people have a job to do. So a CD is a certificate of deposit. Certificates of deposit are where you put your money in, you keep it in for maybe 6 months, maybe a year, sometimes 18 months, and you get a guaranteed interest rate out, but you're not allowed to take your money out. So it's like you invest it and you keep it there, but the money's guaranteed. So in the CD, the yield, that means the percentage you get for investing your money in that CD is 6%. Twice as much was invested in a mutual fund with an annual yield of 10%. And you might be asking yourselves, why wouldn't you give it all to the mutual fund? You get more money out of it. But mutual funds go up and down depending on the market, okay? So mutual funds one day could be negative 25%, the next day could be plus 5%. It goes up and down, up and down. Whereas CDs are guaranteed, okay? They're lower, but they're guaranteed. And just for your information, these percentages are a little high as to not depress you. Okay, CDs these days, you probably get 1.5% because interest rates are very low. Annual mutual funds can be anything depending on the stock market. Stocks have been very good lately. as I said before, but, you know, we're waiting for the crash. Not a crash, just a dip. So in these, do you guys see how there's two different investments? There's the CDs and there's the mutual funds. Because there's two different investments, I'm going to set up a table. So I'm going to set up one line is going to be a row for my CDs, and the other line is going to be a line for my mutual funds. And then on the top, I'm going to write the equation that relates these together. And the equation is the amount that's invested times the percent, which we write as a decimal, equals the yield. And yield is the interest that you get. So the interest that you earn from your investment, they also call that the yield, because that's what you get out of it. Kind of like in baking, the yield is 3 dozen cookies. This is the yield from your investment. So the CD, the percent, is 6%. So I'm going to actually just go ahead and write that as a decimal, just so I do my math right. I'm going to write that in decimal form just so I do my math right. And it says I have a CD annual yield of 6%, twice as much as invested in a mutual fund. How much money was invested in each account? Well, that means I don't know how much was invested. So CD I'm going to call X, mutual fund I'm going to call 2X, because it said twice as much was invested in the mutual fund. And I don't know either of them, so it's easier for me to call one X and the other call 2X than calling one X and one calling half. Then we have to deal with fractions. This is 10% or 0.10. You could also write that as 0.1. Now the way we calculate the yield is we multiply across, just like we multiplied across with our rate times time equals distance problem. Completely different application, but I'm using a similar chart, and it's nice because you still multiply across. So the yield, or the interest that I got for CDs was 0.06x, and the yield for the mutual fund is 0.2x. So notice, I don't have to go to my problem to fill out information about the yield. I can just use the equation. And then I can go back to the problem, and it says the two investments earned $520 a year. And that's what generates my equation. These add up to 520. Because the amount I yield from my CD plus the amount I yield from my mutual fund has to total 520. So I can write 0.06x plus 0.2x equals 520. I can add these. And then I can divide both sides by 26. I'm sorry, 0.26. Okay, thank you. X is 2,000. So how much was invested in each account? Now I can answer my question. 2,000 was invested in the CD because 2,000 was X. I'm sorry, the CD was X. And then the mutual fund was 2X. So for mutual fund, I have to double that. Questions on that? So this equation up top, you're going to want to star, highlight, keep track of, because that's what allows you to calculate how much interest you get at the end of a year. And we're going to get into more complicated versions of interest. This is called simple interest, because the interest is only calculated once per year. But in reality, it's calculated many more times than that. But we got to start somewhere. Questions? There is your assignment.